channel, The Agnostic Philosopher. I'm Don. I don't take a dogmatic stance on things. I'm a philosopher at heart. I'm very curious. I like learning new things, even if it turns out to be idiotic. I like hearing different strains of thought that different people or cultures may have, and so on. So it doesn't faze me if somebody proposes an argument that says there is a God, that there isn't a God, what have you. And in this vein, this is a scientific explanation, maybe about the brain. I didn't watch it, so this is a reaction about what happens when we die. And I love hearing different theories and different ideas. And I mean, if you're going to understand life, you have to have a conception of death, because we know what's coming. We know that there's going to be a physical death. Even if you believe in God and Judgment Day and heaven and all that, and that's where you're going if that's your belief. Unfortunately, you still must die physically to find out if you were right or to gain entry into that. And for atheists and, say, agnostics, however you define them, it's basically over when it's over. So physical death is a reality. That can inform us in our decisions and keep us in better balance while we're alive, because in one sense, the hard times are going to come to an end. So even when you're going through one, it can kind of take a little bit of the edge off of the hard times. And the flip side is the great things and all these things that are going to happen, they too are going to come to an end. So that could kind of walk you back off of being overly jubilant and being depressed when those times don't continue. Anyway, we each explore it our own way and contemplate it, but let's see what this one is about.
In our relentless pursuit for knowledge, there are some questions and mysteries that are much more difficult to decipher than others. And the question of death is arguably the most difficult of all. Yeah. What really happens when the end comes? Can we ever be completely sure until we ourselves reach that point? These are problems that human beings have always wrestled with. But have we finally been given a glimpse of the truth? This is Unveiled, and today we're answering the extraordinary question: did scientists just discover what happens when we die? Do you need the big questions answered? Are you constantly curious? Then why not subscribe to Unveiled for more clips like this one, and ring the bell for more thought-provoking content. Unsurprisingly, there have been countless studies into death over the years, but also, and understandably, there are various ethical considerations which make the business of analyzing and measuring death a little tricky. Death comes to us all, but it's often unexpected. And even in a hospital setting, the focus at the moment of death is usually on trying to keep the dying person alive, rather than recording precisely how death unfolds for them. In February 2022, however, news broke of an accidental recording of a dying brain, which reportedly has given scientists a unique snapshot into a person's final moments. Although details of the recording were released in 2022, the event in question actually took place 6 years earlier in 2016. An 87-year-old patient in Canada was then being treated for epilepsy, which involved doctors taking brain scans to measure his neural activity. However, when the patient unfortunately suffered a heart attack and died during one such scan, it meant that researchers had captured a unique series of moments within his brain, before, during, and after death. With around 900 seconds of brain activity measured in total, analysts were subsequently able to specifically pinpoint 30 seconds before and 30 seconds after the patient passed away. And what they found appeared to support a long-held theory about dying: that your life flashes before your eyes. According to the study, published in the journal Frontiers in Aging Neuroscience, the dying brain showed an increase in gamma activity, releasing brain waves that are ordinarily linked to memory recall. The patterns that were recorded also relate to complex functions such as dreaming and meditation. The suggestion is then that when death arrives, the brain perhaps does embark on the phenomenon sometimes known as life recall. And in the case of this particular patient, it may last for up to 30 seconds after the heart stops beating.
The crazy thing about this, too, is that there's so many memories up there. And I've listened to numerous seminars on human memory, even animal memory, and different parts of the brain that light up, and how we can infuse memories with similar events to it, and the brain sort of merges them, and that's why our memory is unreliable, and so many different facets, and suggestive memories where you might say, well, what color was the school bus when you were outside playing when it passed by? And it's very common for people to say, well, yellow or orange or what have you. And frequently that question is directed by psychologists or sociologists or social psychologists who will say, there was no school bus. I merely suggested that there was one and then you saw one. So our memory is unreliable. But there's so much up there to draw from. And that's what blows me away is like, how quickly is the brain processing these gamma rays? Like your whole life passes before you? Like what part of it? Just salient points, things that were most impactful to you? Because our memory is selective, because our focus is selective. We're driving down the road and we're focused on just particular things going down the road. But every tree, every blade of grass, every vehicle, it isn't on recall. So this kind of stuff is fascinating about how quickly the brain could possibly process all this.
Up until now, most of what's known about this comes from the testament of those who have had a near-death experience.
Right.
The sensation of having revisited key moments from their lives is one of the most often reported by anyone describing an NDE. Scientists have also seen similar gamma surges in the brains of dying animals such as rats during testing. But this latest study offers a unique look at what happens to the human brain. Importantly, those behind the findings highlight that this is still just one case study, and so the results can't yet be applied to every brain. The patient had been diagnosed with epilepsy, which may have affected how his particular brain reacted to death. Similarly, the medications that he had previously taken might have had an effect too. And as no normal brain activity had been measured beforehand to serve as a comparison, it can't be clearly proven that any of the changes in the dying brain were that dramatically different to the patient's standard brain activity. As groundbreaking as this study appears to be then, there are still plenty of questions and mysteries left to be solved. But nevertheless, this study could yet serve as one of the most significant moments in our quest to understand the dying brain, and the human brain in general. For many, the 21st century is shaping up to be an incredibly important period for neuroscience. We've already made important breakthroughs regarding how we understand the senses and how we view the importance of sleep. And thanks to an ever-increasing mass of data, researchers can better than ever before map the brain and identify neurological processes. The human brain is still widely regarded as possibly the most complex single structure in the entire universe, but we've also never understood it quite as well as we do today. The Human Connectome Project, or HCP, is perhaps the most ambitious research initiative relating to the brain overall. A U.S. state-sponsored effort to map the human brain in its entirety. It was started in 2009, originally with a 5-year goal for completion. So massive has the task proven to be, however, that it still hasn't been finished, 13 years later in 2022. The scope of the HCP has grown and grown in that time, though, so that it's now a multifaceted international venture. For example, while part of the project aims to better understand how Alzheimer's disease and dementia take hold, another concentrates on anxiety disorders and how they can be identified by how the brain fires. There are also specific studies looking at the human brain at different points of its lifetime, from infancy through to old age. So while the 2022 Dying Brain study wasn't directly linked with the HCP, we can see how the results of it have hugely contributed to what's become an enormous field of research.
And this field of research was constantly under revision too. And the old theories will be replaced by new ones as new imaging techniques come under review and are developed. But the neural imaging is just fascinating about how things light up and when and why. And when somebody is just thinking about a given thing, certain part of the brain will light up versus thinking about some other type of thing. But it is absolutely complex as to how the interconnectedness, and it's just because there are so many neural pathways and then plaque forming on it. And it was just recently, I just read a study recently, I think in the Wall Street Journal, about the amount of microplastics that are in the brain that have found their way into the brain because of, you drink water out of a plastic bottle, for example, and there's these microplastics, or all the plastics dumped in the ocean that fish might eat a little piece of, and then you eat that piece of fish and it gets And it was back in like the 70s, there was 1970s, there was something like 1 tablespoon of microplastics in the brain. And it's now up to 3. In the typical or average human adult brain, they find that there are 3 tablespoons of plastic. And you're like, okay, that's got to be doing something. What is it? How does that impact when we die and such? But let's see where we go.
Finally, what can we do with the information that the dying brain study has provided? Unlike with so many other areas, it's not as though scientists are expecting a wealth of new and supporting data to arrive anytime soon, due to the ethical considerations involved. A doctor can't just simply measure a patient's brain until they die without seriously neglecting their duty for care. And in fact, according to some reports, one of the reasons why it took until 2022 for details to be released of a brain recording from 2016 is because researchers have been trying to find another similar case in the meantime, but without any luck. This one glimpse of the dying brain is an exceptionally rare event then. And while we might expect more examples to emerge as technology improves and evolves, for now it has set something of a new precedent. Until now, the notion of a dying person's life flashing before their eyes has perhaps been treated somewhat skeptically. No matter how many near-death experiences are reported, the apparent similarities between them are often put down to things like stress of the event, misremembering, or confirmation bias. It's said that patients may recall certain aspects of an NDE only because that's what they had previously expected would happen during one. But now there appears to be genuine scientific findings to support the claims. The idea of life recall may no longer be so easily dismissed, as we now know that in at least this one case, the areas of the brain involved with memory recollection were particularly stimulated right at the end of life. Unfortunately, what this study cannot do is stop death in its tracks. The search for immortality goes on across all sectors of science and technology. But one consideration might be whether this latest development will lead to us managing death a little differently in the future. As the Human Connectome Project, amongst other things, seeks to better equip us to fight against various neurological conditions that can affect the human brain. If we're now getting a grip on the brain activity of death itself, then might we soon try to tackle that as well? If not to prevent it, then at least to ensure that when death does come, we can shape how it affects our final moments. Now, perhaps there is some comfort already to be found. Although this remains just one case study, and many of the conclusions to draw from it are still hypothetical, the suggestion is that when we leave this life, we do so in a dreamlike state of memory recall. For one patient, at least, the brain activity during death appeared to stimulate these kinds of reflective, recollective final thoughts. And that's why, to some extent, scientists might have discovered what happens when we die. Or at least they might have discovered a little bit more about one small part of it. But of course, there is still so much about dying that remains a mystery.
There's the difference between death and dying. And I was just going to point that out, but he just used it. And it's like, what happens when we die? When people, religious folks, contemplate that, let's just say from a Christian perspective, it's what happens when we die? What happens after you die? And your spirit, your soul, some part of you that's still representative of you, incorporeal, moves on into the heavens or somewhere else. Others think it's paradise on earth, that you go to a state of sleep, and then Christ comes back, judges you. If you're acceptable, you get a new body and you live on earth again. Paradise, it's called. But dying is a different thing, and the brain is still engaged until that moment when you check out. And there's like that, so to speak, gray area there between what is there an exact point that you can say pinpoint that delineates when you were alive to now you're dead. And he started the video by saying, or somewhere early in the video by saying, up 30 seconds after the person either is dead or appears to be dead, this process can still be ongoing in the brain to where you are aware. That person is still aware. They're conscious on some level, reliving these memories.
And there are so many metaphysical questions about the soul, spirit, mind, body that will continue to stoke debate. It's human nature to ponder our own mortality from time to time, And perhaps it's unsurprising that there have been various efforts made to beat death over the years. But equally, while all of that's happening, it's crucial to also make the most of life, to fully experience every moment as best we can. Because if the incredibly complex structure of the human brain tells us anything, it's that our lives are truly a unique and amazing opportunity. What do you think? Is there anything we missed?
Well, I wouldn't say there's something that they missed, but I mean, they did a very nice job on this one. But it's like it's such a broad topic, you could come at it from so many angles. But I love the philosophical, or that he brought in the metaphysical considerations. Whether you believe in God or not is irrelevant. In philosophy, you study the different strains of thought, and they don't infect you necessarily, but you hear them. And diametrically opposed lines of thinking, and you contemplate them, you think about them, you look at the arguments being made, the assumptions being made, the time at which it was made, how those assumptions were culturally influenced, and so on. And this is one of these topics, life and death, and they covered a lot of nice parts in this. They did a very nice job in this. I'm going to leave the link below to the video that I reacted to, and you could go check out their channel as well. But fascinating, the human brain and the implications of these gamma waves, which are connected to memory, impacting us in this one case of a guy who was on epilepsy drugs, and he was 87 in an MRI or a CAT scan. And you're like, okay, that's a very small sample size. That's not representative of the broader population. Are they gonna come up with another one that they can compare that one to? Is some other coincidence? Let's hope it is that happens. I don't know. So, all right, guys, I hope you enjoyed that. I love this. This sort of inquiry is just philosophical in nature, and it is a blast. So please subscribe and like, and thanks for playing along. I'll see you on another video. Have a great day, and keep thinking philosophically.